Hello, and welcome to another insightful episode of Compliance Clips, where we strive to bring industry expertise to your experience. Today's episode is the first of two. We are speaking with Joel Lacoursiere about how remote traffic cameras are impacting carrier CVORs. You are going to want to hear about how driving as little as 1 or 2 kilometers an hour over the speed limit in a regulated vehicle could garner 5 CVOR points, even if a citation wasn't issued.
Well, good morning, Joel. Welcome to Compliance Clips. How are you doing today, sir?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm doing well. It's a bright Monday. It's December 18th. Here we are. There's still no snow outside, so we're doing okay here.
Isn't that the wildest part, eh? Isn't that wild? So,
I know.
Joel, you're with Paradigm Paralegal Services, a company that you own. So do us a favor and give our audience a quick little background of yourself and Paradigm, if you would, please.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate, first off, thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to take up, a few minutes of your airtime here. It's always a pleasure dealing with you guys. It's always entertaining. And at the end of the day, we learn things. So it's nice to be part of this circle. I greatly appreciate the invite today. My name is Joel Lacoursiere, and yes, I do own a company called Paradigm Ticket Defense. I specialize in CVOR defense, and my background, my previous occupation as a police officer for 11 years allowed me to transition nicely into something that was still, it lent well from my enforcement days. So I had some courses that you can only get through the police college and through various police departments, including accident reconstruction, various levels of that with years of on-road experience, as well as CVOR initiatives and blizzards and certain courses that are CVOR specific as to the various levels of inspection for anything transport related and carrier related. And it lent very well to what I'm doing now, representing trucking companies and exploring and understanding the caveats from that background has lent well to helping carriers keep the wheels on the ground and on the trucks, and looking after many of the largest carriers around for any court-related matters, accident-related, inspection-related, ELD-related, and of course today's topic, which is going to be photo radar and photo red light camera tickets, which definitely has CVOR implications, and we'll talk about that at length.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Wow, cool. Well, that's awesome, because that experience you've got definitely lends well to helping motor carriers better manage what they've got going on that they need to be aware of. And so many of them don't today. And it's an unfortunate aspect. So, the hope is that with our information sessions through Compliance Clips and also industry news, that we can kind of help everybody do a better job at managing their risks. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about this unique situation here where we've got these cameras that are mounted everywhere now, and we know that we're being watched all the time, but now we're starting to see something shift a little bit from a commercial standpoint. And I'll be honest with you, I recently, or not recently, but last month, I got a red light ticket, to be honest with you, and I was quite shocked by it, because I'm like, hey, I'm a risk guy. What the heck? And through further investigation, we find out where it is and whatnot. And I went, aha. I had 2 people in the car at that time. We were in a rush to get to our next client visit. And I said, you know what? We were jibber jabbering away. And I'll bet you that distracted me enough. I didn't see that yellow light, and I carried on through and caught it. And hey, so was it. So now, mind you, it was just a minor red light ticket, and it didn't affect my MVR. But we're now hearing that from a commercial aspect, it's hitting the commercial abstract side of things. So even though we don't know who the driver is, we're now able to chase that backwards. So between red light cameras and photo radar, what's going on, Joel?
Well, it's interesting that you're saying this, because you're right. As a non-CVOR related driver in your personal abstract, this would have no reflection whatsoever, because in essence, what's happened are these municipalities that are screaming for money from, back taxes, et cetera, or any leg up in terms of raising revenue. And John, as you saw, it's not a cheap ticket. It's $325. On the personal side, it's not associated to anybody except the registered owner, which means it doesn't have any points. It's it's just a big parking ticket, and it's a nuisance. And as you received in the mail, the photograph clearly shows that it's the vehicle's in the intersection. Yep. And it even tells you the calibration in terms of how far into the intersection after the light turned red you actually were from a time standpoint.
Correct.
And the bizarre situation is that for whatever reason, the MTO in their infinite wisdom, I guess, made a decision, because these are all community-driven safety initiatives that are, you know, very wealthy pocket lining for most municipalities, and that's why they're popping up all over the place. They're uncontestable. But the MTO decided that even though it doesn't have any attachment to a driver specifically, the license plate is registered to a commercial vehicle owner's registration number, which we of course want to avoid because it does carry 5 CVOR points.
Yes.
To verify this information, I do have an email thread from the MTO directly, which from what I've learned recently, if you do send an email to the Ontario at CVOR, or sorry, a CVOR at ontario.ca website or email address, it's going to take them a lot longer to respond. The response time seems to be far greater than it used to be. Thankfully, I was able to capture this email clip from about 2.5 years ago now, stating that it will indeed be showing up on a CVOR. So in knowing that, we carriers have to at least delay it. For the most part, as you can see from the pictorial evidence, the pictures are pretty clear.
Yes.
And even though the driver is not identified, most carriers can go back and associate the license plate as to who the driver was.
Right.
But because there's 5 CVOR points, we want to delay these as long as we can. Check the camera calibrations because they do include that in disclosure. And for the most part, what we're doing right now is just a delay tactic to keep these 5 CVOR points from the CVOR as long as we possibly can, because 5 CVOR points is the same as careless driving in any other major offense.
Wow.
And it's quite a sting to a company that, you know, otherwise is probably running itself proper, but a driver mistimed a light, who knows? There's all sorts of environmental factors that could have been to play if they felt they were loaded and they couldn't stop in time.
Sure.
The onus is still on the driver.
Yep.
But because of that, we want to delay these. And the other strange caveat is I've had carriers that have inadvertently paid this and it has not showed up on a CVOR.
Oh.
I've had other carriers that have fought it and delayed it as long as they could on their own, and it does show up, or it just shows up because they've been told there are no CVOR points. They pay it,
right,
and they don't have a lot of recourse. I've had some people that have had some success in challenging through that email address, the CVOR at ontario.ca, and they've taken the points away, but there's really no rhyme or reason. And about 50% of the time, it's still showing up on an abstract, even though it's supposed to show up every time. There's still a bit of an MTO reporting glitch.
So some
And the
inconsistencies
same goes for
here.
photo radar as well.
Yeah. So some inconsistencies here by all means. So
Greatly.
Yeah.
And it's quite bizarre because normally the MTO is quite diligent, but I think with some of the staffing issues we're seeing at the court level, I think a lot of different government agencies are experiencing those same things. So these email addresses that were previously being monitored by a person, I don't know if they have the resources to keep doing it, but I have had carriers that had mistakenly paid this and then asked, why is it showing up on the CVOR? And they've appealed to them and they've taken those points away. But it's such an inconsistent pattern that it's just worth making sure we're fighting these because they're supposed to show up, and and a lot of times they do.
Right. I actually just had a recent experience with a client, and they're a local transport outfit in the GTA, and they've had numerous red light tickets, and the first few did not have any points associated with it, and then they started getting points. And it was interesting because once the points started showing up, that's when they started to panic.
Right.
And I said, well, the unfortunate aspect is you are delayed in your panic. It should have been after the first red light, because these are totally 100% preventable. So we've got to work with our drivers to better understand. Don't get into that situation. Be aware of that stale green, and don't be running that yellow light because you think it's yellow now, but 1.8 seconds later, it is red.
I know.
So, yeah.
And they're calibrated at certain intersections that are high traffic, of course. And it's incredible to see, John, the municipalities that are jumping on this. I mean, $325 a pop is not inexpensive. And I think what we're all looking for is just consistency.
Yeah.
If the MTO is applying points for, carrier A, who pays the ticket, and half the time it shows up or doesn't show up, and then that's the pattern you're now accustomed to believing. But because of these inconsistencies and the fact that this email address just doesn't seem to be monitored as regularly as it once was, it's difficult. It puts a carrier in a rough position.
Oh, no doubt.
You know.
So how does the the photo radar play into it? You know, this is something new. Well, I shouldn't say new. We had this many, many years ago. Photo
Right.
radar was very popular years ago, and then it got kind of abolished or abandoned or whatever. And I know that there are provinces in Western Canada that still use photo radar. Here in Ontario, they brought it back, but for certain speed zones, certain locations like schools and, you know, different areas that are very concerning with safety and whatnot. So can you enlighten us a little bit more on that?
Well, there's no question that there's municipalities have a propensity to put these cameras for both photo radar. Photo radar are popping up almost inevitably all over the GTA, and it's usually almost always in school zone or community safety zones, which a lot of times are one and the same. And they're calibrated for the speed, which means if you're going 2 or 3, I've had carriers that have sent me photo radar tickets that are 3 or 4 kilometers over, and it's a very minimal fine. It comes to about $60 with it because there's still a fine, a victim fine surcharge, which is levied on all provincial offenses across the province. That's inclusive of that. But for $60, they're absorbing 2 points because speeding 1 kilometer an hour over the limit for a CVOR related license plate it starts at 2 CVOR points.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But these cameras are so calibrated, and the only defense you really have is to check the calibration of the cameras for the intersections for the red light cameras. And when it comes to photo radar, it's the same thing. We have the right as legal practitioners or any driver or carrier. You can ask for the calibration charts, and the city preemptively, when you order disclosure, will send it. There really isn't a lot of argument to be had in terms of, for the most part, they're indefensible. But you're not wrong. They're springing up in areas that are what would be called POP, which is problem-oriented policing, which areas that are kind of identified as you know, more likely to have kids or higher numbers of pedestrians, and that they want to curb these. I understand the logic. If it's a safety measure and they've, you know, quantified the amount of incidences in a certain area, they're going to capitalize on those areas. But these are the return on investment on these programs and these initiatives for the equipment they have. I'm sure within the first month they're probably covering their bases, and everything after that is gravy money for the municipality. So they're jumping on them left, right, and center.
Well,
and I'm seeing them in Windsor as well. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's understandable. They're there for a purpose, and I'm sure every one of us that drives a vehicle could relate 100%, because I know I do it a lot in my little town. We have a little town here. Speed limit's 50 kilometers an hour, and anytime I go through a small town, I try to think, this could be my town. Do I want idiots blowing through here at 80 kilometers an hour all the time? No, this is my town. These are our kids, our community kids and whatnot. So
that's right.
People have to relate to that and realize that, hey, I need to slow down. And especially in a commercial motor vehicle, because it's so much harder to get that thing stopped quickly.
That's right. That's right. And I think there's just a level of accountability. I mean, carriers are already, you know, facing also a litany of issues, from reduced freight that's moving around to a real driver shortage, as we know, and we've spoken about before, gentlemen. But the quality of the driver that's accessible these days, you really have to take a chance on a lot of new drivers, and you really have to drill these points home that you just stated about pretend it's your own community. And I think sometimes that mindset goes a long way. What I kind of struggle with is that carriers, listen, I go to court for trucking companies. It's not always in my best interest to you know, when companies are getting tickets, it means more for my bottom line. But in the same token, I just don't like kind of the unfair playing field of, you know, really punishing CVOR related license plates as opposed to a regular driver. Kind of what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I would think, you know, a series of fines for a carrier that's responsible without any points associated would be enough for them to tell their drivers and to, you know, implement training to say, be mindful. And the other thing that we have here, there's also certain apps such as Waze. Waze will tell you what's up ahead, and it is now inclusive of other drivers reporting that there's photo radar up ahead, or there's, you know, red light cameras in these intersections. So there's a lot of ways to prevent these things.
All righty. Well, if it feels like we just cut Joel off in mid-sentence, you're not wrong. But there's a reason for that. We do try and keep our compliance clip sessions limited to 15 minutes because we understand how busy everyone is, and that's part of the brand. But it's not the end of the interview with Joel. We're going to finish off the discussion where we get into a little bit more detail and we explore more on the traffic cameras and how they're impacting your carrier's CVOR in our next release. So please stay tuned wherever you happen to be capturing this, whether it's on LinkedIn. You can follow myself, Rick Morgan, or my peer and partner in crime, John Farquhar, or you can follow us directly through our Compliance Clips podcast. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you shortly in the next entertaining and informative Compliance Clips.